Chris Olave to the Steelers. Ladies and gentlemen, a little scuttlebutt, if you will. Okay, so this has been hot in the streets. So a lot of people have been reaching out to me. I've been seeing this on Twitter. So this is one of those rumors that has been popping up recently, but it's kind of been floating out there for the last week. This right here is from the Steelers version of Chat Now. So this is like the Steelers version of the Trizzy Trace. And he's going to talk a little bit about the idea of the Steelers trading for Chris Olave. Now, just from a Saints standpoint, as the face of the franchise, this kind of makes sense for everybody, okay? So for the Saints, Chris Olave is in the last year of his actual rookie contract. Now, the Saints did pick up his fifth-year option because it's a first-round pick, so they have the right to do that. So technically, they do control his contract or whatever for the next 2 seasons. So the Saints kind of have a risk of, all right, well, do we trade him now if either A, the Saints know already we don't want to, in a couple of years, we don't want to pick up his, we don't want to extend him or restructure or whatever. We don't want to do all that. Or if they are afraid of the injuries, if they're thinking, look, if he gets hurt next year, his value is driven way down. We lose out on, now here's the devil's advocate to that. He's on a relatively cheap deal. So it's not like the Saints, financially, it kind of behooves the Saints to keep Chris Olave, right? It's like, oh, he's a productive player when he's on the field. He's cheap. That's kind of what we need, kind of what we want, right? So if you think about it that way, there really is no incentive to trade him unless you are that concerned about the injuries. And if you're concerned about the injuries and you can get I would say a third, but if you can get a first, second, third, then you just kind of cut your losses and let it rip. As for the Steelers, if they are still in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, while simultaneously being the only people in the sweepstakes, but if they are trying to get Aaron Rodgers, it makes sense. Hey, we're in a win now mode. We got DK Metcalf. We just got a third for George Pickens. Let's just flip that third for Chris Olave. Go Chris Olave and DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers and see what we can do. That makes a lot of sense for both parties. All right, the Saints are not in a win now mode. The Steelers theoretically would be if they got Aaron Rodgers. Now, I kind of buried the lead in the inverse of buried the lead. I said the lead too early. But when I say trade Chris Olave as a Saints fan, you might be like, yeah, get a first for him. Or yeah, get a second for him. Ladies and gentlemen, that ain't it. That ain't going to happen. Okay, we have 2 wide receiver trades that just happened that set the market. DK Metcalf, second-round pick. You're not getting better than that. Okay, you're not going to get a first if DK was a second. Then you have George Pickens. George Pickens has some off-field stuff, whatever, but pretty decent comp as far as what you might get back for Olave, which would be a third. Especially if you factor in the injuries, maybe the injuries and the off-field stuff for Pickens kind of wash out. So a third seems fair. Now, I've seen some people say they wouldn't go higher than a fifth. Now, that seems a little low to me. I think that's way low, honestly. So let's just call it a third. All right. Would you trade Chris Olave for a third-round pick if you're the New Orleans Saints? Simultaneously, would you trade a third for Chris Olave for the Steelers?
Now, another popular rumor that has been surfacing here on Steelers Twitter is a potential trade for Chris Olave, of course, the number 1 receiver there in New Orleans. So, once again, let's ask the question: is this something that could actually happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I think the answer to that question, guys, is likely no. Olave's an awesome player. I don't want to make it seem like I don't want Olave. If he's available, I'm definitely trying to make something happen here, especially for the right price tag. He's only 24 years old. He's a fantastic route runner. He had the best contested catch rate of his entire career last year. And, with you having that big-bodied X receiver in DK Metcalf, having that true Z in Chris Olave.
First of all, shout out to this guy's lettuce. Great salad up top with the dome. But this also, we've been saying this for a while now. Chris Olave is good. I like Chris Olave. I think he's a really good player. Last year, I was making the case that he's, what did I say last year, top 15 wide receiver somewhere in there. I think he's better in the role that he would be playing in Pittsburgh. I think he's better as kind of your off wide receiver, kind of your, the the Robin to DK Metcalf's Batman. I think he's better in a perfect world for the Saints. If Mike Thomas was still the Mike Thomas, I think Chris Olave would thrive as the second receiver to that. I don't know if he is a tried and true number one guy. I just don't know if he's that player. And that's not even like a dig. That's some players are just better in certain roles. I always use this comparison, but in Green Bay, back in the day when they had Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson was just better at being the number one wide receiver, and Cobb was better working as the second receiver, kind of that off receiver. And whenever Jordy was hurt and Cobb had to be the one, he was horrible. It's just a different kind of thing. It's a different way of playing the position. And I think Olave might be better off moving forward in his career in that position. He's not going to be that with the Saints, right? The Saints have a really weak, really shallow wide receiver room. So for the Saints, again, like if you are in a full reset, which they certainly are, then this is probably the time to, I don't want to say hedge your losses, but your time to recoup something, get a third, stack some more picks, and do the same thing next year, which is have 8-9 draft picks and just do that a couple years over and over. All of a sudden, boom, you've brought in 25, 30 super young players. Right? 30 is high, but somewhere between 21 and 26, 27 rookies, and a majority of your team, almost half your team, is on rookie contracts. So I see the vision.
At Z would be awesome. Would be an awesome pairing for probably the next at least half decade here in Pittsburgh. Combining DK Metcalf and Chris Olave would be one of the best wide receiver duos in all of football. So I don't want to make it seem like I wouldn't be excited or I wouldn't want to trade for Chris Olave. But he does have a lengthy concussion history. Now, that's partly with Derek Carr to blame because he gave him some hospital shots that put him in some tough situations, ended up getting some concussions throughout his career. And the most he's ever played in an NFL season is 11.
Did Derek Carr play at Ohio State with Chris Olave? Interesting.
11 games. He's only played 3 years, but the most he's ever played is 11 games. I think the other 2 years he played in 8, which was last year, and then 9 his rookie season. So he's somebody that has had trouble staying on the field. Also, he's got 2 years left on his rookie contract. The Saints did pick up his 5th-year option this year, so he's still got 2 years of contract control there with the Saints. And his cap hit's only $6 million. So the Saints have a really affordable, really young, good number one receiver on their roster. And with Derek Carr leaving, and you're going to be having a young quarterback in there. I don't know if it's a good idea to get rid of that new quarterback's number one target when they're going to be looking to prove themselves as an NFL starter heading into the year. I mean, you look at the rest of the wide receiver room that the Saints have. Brandon Cooks,
not much.
Rashid Shaheed is a pretty decent piece, but definitely not a number one. Bub Means,
the
Cedric
boy.
Wilson Jr. You take Chris Olave out of this room, and it's definitely not a great wide receiver group. I mean, like I said earlier, I would take the Pittsburgh.
I mean, you go, let's just say you trade Chris Olave, okay? Starting the season with Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler and Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Wilson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Bub Means, who the hell ever, man, whoo, baby, that is tough.
For Steelers wide receiver room.
Unless you go get Amari Cooper or somebody kind of fixing things. But that's a conversation too, right? So let's say trade out Chris Olave, get a third, go sign Amari Cooper with some of the Derek Carr money. All of a sudden, things look a little different. Now you have a third. Now you have Amari Cooper. You have Rashid Shaheed. All right, Rashid Shaheed can be the speed guy to the, Amari Cooper's kind of a compliment to that. All right, then you got the tight ends. We know how Kellen Moore wants to operate there. Okay, we can make some stuff happen there. So maybe that's part of the thought process
over what the New Orleans Saints have right now. So to get rid of your bona fide number one guy that is still very cheap against your cap just doesn't really seem like a sound move to me, unless they're just really concerned about the concussions and they really just want to start over and they really want to embrace a full rebuild here. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. If I were in the shoes of the New Orleans Saints, I'm keeping Chris Olave for at least one more season, and then maybe I think about trading him on his final year of his rookie contract next year if he doesn't work out with the new quarterback. But because it doesn't really make a ton of sense for them to trade him right now, they are willing to trade him. I think it's going to be an extremely high price tag. It's going to be a first or second round pick, and of course the Steelers have
first that's not going to happen. A second, maybe, but it still seems like a lot. a first. I don't think a first. If someone wants to trade a first for Chris Olave, I think you do it in a heartbeat. I think that's way too high.
A lot of compensatory picks, and they of course got a third-round pick in exchange for George Pickens for next year's NFL draft. But you only have one first rounder and you only have one second rounder. So those are scarce resources there in the first 2 rounds still, even though you have a bunch of draft picks in rounds 3 through 6. I'm not sure if Omar Khan and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be willing to give up a first or a second round pick next year, especially because they're probably going to be looking for a quarterback next year. So, giving up that early round draft pick, I'm just not sure if that's something the Steelers are going to be looking at as something.
I mean, the Steelers are in no great shakes. Like, if they get Aaron Rodgers, okay, sure, whatever. But Aaron Rodgers didn't do much with the Jets last year. So if, like, theoretically, a first or second or even a third, I guess, from the Steelers is pretty decent. Like, it's not like we're trading with the Chiefs here. So if you get a first, like, that could easily be a top 10 pick. Trade for a second, it's early in the second round more than likely. So this is not a bad trade partner to do this with. And I know, like I said, I like Chris Olave. Nothing against him. But when you are a team facing a rebuild and you got a guy who you just, like, a couple more years, you have his contract, like, do you make the decision now? Do you kind of weigh the risk reward? I could see it.
As they're going to be willing to do. So although Chris Olave is a really, really good receiver, I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on that rumor. Plus, the person that's been pushing that rumor, NFL Notifications, has been known to put out fake reports and all this different stuff out there.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the actual reports I've seen is that the Saints aren't really interested. Like, there's not a lot of movement from both sides. I think the Steelers are probably interested in being open-minded about this, but I don't think the Saints are necessarily, like, actively trying to push these negotiations forward. And don't forget, it takes 2 to tango when it comes to these trades. So now things do change. Like I said, the Derek Carr money, all of a sudden, is Amari Cooper available? Is whoever else available? Do you change that wide receiver room up a little bit? Do you have plans for that? We're getting close to that time where the Saints are going to want some continuity. They're going to want to know, like, who's on the team, who's on the field. We're getting close to when practice and camp and all that starts. So if they want to get something like this squared away, it's got to happen relatively soon. For the Steelers, same thing, right? Like, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. He's not on the team. So a lot of this hinges on stuff that's just not materialized yet.
There on Twitter, that's been pretty well documented. So I wouldn't take too much stock in what NFL Notifications has to say about.
Yeah, so I mean, there you go. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, it's one of those things where I see it. You never want players traded, I guess, as a fan. You like the players that are here, obviously, especially the ones you draft. But just from a strictly, like, business standpoint, just from a strictly chess pieces kind of standpoint, I totally understand it. If it was Madden, it's like, I probably don't do it for a third. You might as well just hang on to him for the next couple of years. For a first or a second, certainly a first, you probably make it happen. But yeah, I mean, we'll be keeping up with this, because if obviously, like, this is a huge. If the Saints did do this, talk about draw that line in the sand and make it a whole lot deeper of the rebuild. We know they are in a rebuild, but something like this would be really, really talking out loud of exactly what their plans are, So, but let me know in the comments below what you think. Would you do it? Would you not do it? What would you ask for? Let me know. I will see you in the next video.